While Russian television channels show cartoons about superweapons and peace initiatives, behind the scenes things are happening that make even Kremlin sympathizers clutch their heads. Russia's civilian aviation is rolling back into the 1990s. Aircraft from the past, import substitution buried, and not a single new airliner delivered over the entire past year. And what else is left when parts are no longer supplied and specialists are fleeing? Meanwhile, the security service of Ukraine is carrying out precise strikes against extremely rare radar systems and air defense assets worth billions of dollars. All of this is turning the sky over Russia into open gates for drones. Who will protect Moscow now? On the other side of the planet, Donald Trump is creating his own alternative to the United Nations, a peace council. To get in, one has to pay as much as for a small city, and an invitation for Putin has already been sent. Not by accident, the Kremlin was given a chance to rebuild Gaza. Since when are terrorists trusted with construction? At the same time, China delivered a public slap to the Kremlin. While Moscow keeps silent, Beijing openly blames Russia for the failure of the operation in Venezuela and for not warning about the abduction of Nicolas Maduro. Are they allies after this? And as a final chord, Armenia is not just outraged. Its parliament calls Russian propagandists, quote, shit on a stick. That's it, the masks are off. Words that no one would have dared to say a year ago are now being spoken from the podium. But the most unexpected thing is Trump's letter. He is literally blackmailing Denmark and Norway. Hand over Greenland or there will be consequences. At the same time, he complains that he did not receive the Nobel Prize and says he will now think only about benefits for the United States. How do you like this return of geopolitical ego? This is where we begin. Let's go. When an airplane is not a luxury, but a relic.
That is exactly what Russia's civilian aviation looks like now. Because of Western sanctions, domestic airlines have been left with the wreckage of a former fleet. No parts, no maintenance, and almost no aircraft. What did they decide in response? To bring back into the sky those that were written off long ago. This is not about restoration, but about the full return of models such as the Tu-204, the An-148, and the IL-96. All of these are designs from the previous century. Imported Boeing 747 aircraft are also returning, planes that are 30 years old or more. They will be repaired quietly in countries the Kremlin calls friendly. This is what aviation import substitution looks like. According to the plan, in the year 2025, airlines were supposed to receive 15 new airliners. In reality, they received none. Not a single aircraft, not a single control yoke, not one new plane entered service. Where are the loud promises about independent aviation? Where are the superjets? Where is the MC-21? The answer is obvious. Instead of takeoff, there is a fall. A fall not only in numbers, but also in trust. Who would want to fly on a flying museum when there are not even spare parts? And most importantly, who will be responsible when these old machines start falling? But there will be no answers as always. Only developments, plans, and parades on television. And meanwhile, passengers book tickets on the wings of the past. The security service of Ukraine is destroying rare Russian radar stations and air defense systems. When people talk about precision strikes, they usually mean something symbolic, but in the case of the security service of Ukraine, these are surgical strikes, so precise that they hit not just equipment, but the very nerve nodes of Russia's defense. In the year 2025, unique radar stations known as Gamad and Protivnik G were destroyed. These stations are not deployed everywhere. Russia has only a handful of them. Gamad is one of the few radar systems capable of tracking low observable targets under conditions of intense electronic countermeasures. The loss of even one such installation is not just damage, it is the amputation of vision for the entire air defense system. Protivnik G is another treasure of the Russian military arsenal. This station can detect targets at altitudes of up to 200 kilometers, and under certain conditions can even track low Earth orbit satellites. Its operational range reaches up to 400 kilometers. Imagine that. It can see farther than most surface-to-air missiles can fly. The total damage from these losses is estimated at $4 billion. But money is not the main issue. The real problem is the gaps in defense. It is precisely through these gaps that Ukrainian Iranian drones are now penetrating ever deeper into Russian territory. When one station is destroyed, it is a tragedy. When an entire layer of defense is wiped out, it is a strategic failure. An air defense system that was built for years as impenetrable now looks more like a sieve, and the longer the war lasts, the more of these holes appear. The Pentagon calls it a loss of advantage. In Moscow, they prefer to stay silent, but on the ground, silence is no longer possible. What happens next, when the sky is no longer under control? Donald Trump creates an alternative to the United Nations, the Peace Council. This is not a joke. This is not a parody. This is the reality of the year 2026. Donald Trump is creating his own version of the United Nations, called the Peace Council. Not every country will be allowed to join, only those that bring at least $1 billion with them. A membership fee for the right to participate. According to the charter reviewed by Bloomberg, Trump himself will personally decide whom to invite to the negotiating table and whom to exclude. No voting, no equality. This is not diplomacy. It is a club by personal invitation. A new world order in the style of an American corporation. And here is the first loud name on the invitation list: Vladimir Putin. The president of Russia, accused of war crimes, is supposed, according to Trump's idea, to take part in the reconstruction of the Gaza sector. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has already confirmed that Moscow is studying the proposal. In other words, discussions are underway, without embarrassment, without irony. While the entire world avoids shaking hands with Putin, Trump offers him a role in building a new Middle East. The question arises, is this naivety or a deliberate game? Because if the United States stops distinguishing between those who can be invited to a peace council and those who should be tried in The Hague, what remains of the moral foundation of international politics? A peace council, $1 billion for entry, and an invitation for a man who started the largest war in Europe since the Second World War. Is this really the architecture of the world now being drawn in Washington? Or is it just a show in which peace is played by a bank and justice by an accountant? China accuses Russia of failing the operation in Venezuela. When an ally turns into a burden, it sounds dramatic, but that is exactly how Russia is now viewed in Beijing. After the loud and unexpected operation by the United States in Venezuela, during which Nicolas Maduro was captured, China has officially expressed outrage, and it is blaming the Kremlin. Sources cited by The Times report that Beijing is not just surprised, it is furious. The American operation caught China off guard. Diplomats were evacuated in advance. Air defense systems remained silent. Russian S-300 and Buk M2 systems did not work at all. Everything that was supposed to protect Caracas turned out to be useless, and these were systems supplied by Russia and controlled by it. But the main issue is not the lost missiles. The main issue is lost trust. Chinese officials are asking a direct question. Why did the ally not warn them? Why did Russia, which was considered a security guarantor in the region, allow such a failure? And if the Kremlin cannot protect even its own partner in South America, can it really be a guarantor of anything at all? This is the first time Beijing has publicly criticized Russia for a foreign policy failure, and it is an alarming signal, because criticism can be followed by conclusions, and conclusions by a reassessment of alliances. China does not forgive humiliation, especially when it looks like incompetence. Now, as the war in Europe continues and every point of influence becomes critical, the loss of China's trust may turn out to be no less painful than the loss of a satellite, or of Maduro. Armenia responds sharply to Russian propagandists. When diplomacy ends, the truth begins. The Speaker of the Armenian Parliament, Alen Simonyan, is no longer holding back. Directly and openly, he called Russian propagandists, Vladimir Solovyov and Alexander Dugin, quote, shit on a stick. This is not an outburst. This is an official position. The words were spoken not behind closed doors, but in an interview, and were aimed at those who openly called for expanding the special military operation beyond Ukraine, including onto Armenian territory. According to the logic of these ideologues, if Russia can bomb Kiev for the sake of its security, then why not start bombing Yerevan? This time, Armenia did not remain silent. Simonyan added that if given the opportunity, he would certainly convey his opinion to his Russian colleagues. But this is not only about an opinion, it is a diplomatic rupture voiced to the entire country. Just a few years ago, such words would have seemed impossible. Armenia is a longtime ally of Russia within the Collective Security Treaty Organization, a recipient of weapons, a trade partner. But today, rhetoric in Yerevan is growing louder, from ally to distance, from ally to self-respect. When Armenian authorities speak about propaganda, they are speaking not only about words, but about consequences. It is precisely such statements by Russian mouthpieces that generate aggression, claims to Chuzhia territories, and illusions of imperial revival. And Yerevan makes it clear, it will no longer play this game. Before, Russia could afford to impose its will. Today, it no longer can. Armenia speaks loudly, and it seems it is being heard. Donald Trump threatens Denmark and Norway over Greenland and the Nobel Prize.
Because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor.
If you thought Greenland was just ice and polar bears, you were mistaken. For Donald Trump, it is a strategic point worth launching a geopolitical offensive over, and that is exactly what he is doing now, against two countries at once, Denmark and Norway. It began with an ultimatum to Copenhagen: remove the Russian threat from the shores of Greenland. Quote, for 20 years, NATO told Denmark that you need to remove the Russian threat from Greenland. Denmark failed. Now the time has come, and it will be done. Just like that, without equivocation, the United States will decide for itself who controls Arctic land, without discussion. And then, a letter to Oslo. Trump personally writes to the Prime Minister of Norway, complains that he was not awarded the Nobel Prize for stopping 8 wars, and draws a conclusion. He is no longer obliged to think about peace, only about the interests of the United States of America. Peace, according to him, will not be safe until America gains full control over Greenland. But this is not just resentment, this is an ultimatum. The entire logic of international law is being called into question. What document, in Trump's view, gives Denmark the right to Greenland? None, he believes. Only a boat that once landed on the island. But according to him, Americans also had boats. That means that now a former president of the United States and a possible future candidate for the White House is threatening NATO allies because he was not recognized as a peacemaker and was not given a prestigious award. At the same time, he is demanding territory, publicly, in writing. From this moment on, every leader should reflect. What if tomorrow Trump does not like Finland, or Sweden, or Canada? What will he demand next? This is no longer about Greenland. It is about how the personal ambitions of one individual can grow into an international conflict, and how NATO allies suddenly find themselves facing a choice to be partners of the United States or objects of its claims. Thank you for watching until the end. That means you truly care about what is happening in the world, beyond the facade of official statements and polished speeches. If you want to continue receiving the same direct, honest, and vivid analysis, subscribe. Here we talk about what matters most. We are not afraid to call things by their proper names, and we keep the focus on what truly affects our lives. See you soon. It will get even hotter.